Okay, so in this video number 2, I'm going to review the water calculator app that we created in module 3. And the details are here in SAM for module 3. So you see what it is. It's an app that will allow us to calculate how long it will take us to fill up this container from, say, this line to this line. All right, so the test data we have is it's 2 inches. The diameter of this container is 11, and it takes, using the fountain outside the classroom, it takes about 30 seconds to fill up 1 liter of water. So those are the 3 inputs for this program: are the height, the diameter, and the time it takes to fill up 1 liter of water from the fountain. Okay, so our app, I'm just going to review what we've already built. I have it running here right now in the emulator. You see, it's just a very basic app. It's using a constraint layout, which is the default layout whenever we create a basic activity. All right, so it's a constraint layout with a diameter. So this is a text view for the diameter label and the height label and the flow rate label. Then we have edit texts. So we have 3 edit texts on our form to allow us to input the data. So if we click on one of those, you see it's a little input field. We've got a big label or text view at the top for our header, and then we have a button. All right, so I'm going to open it up. It's open here in Android Studio. So the layouts are down in the resources layout folder. And remember, same as our Hello World program, the activity main is the overall structure of the screen, but on the activity main there is an include for the content main, and it's on this file where we make our changes. So there's this constraint layout which sits in the activity main.xml file, or it's included in there. Okay, so what I did to build this so far, if you look in the design mode, you'll see it's a little bit slow, but it'll flip over in a second here. Okay, so my preview has opened up here in design mode. So you'll see there's a lot of connections made. This is the constraint layout, so you can see all these little connections. So say, for example, this button is connected to the parent on the left, to the parent on the right, but then it's hard to tell, but it's connected to the flow rate. The top of the calculate button is connected to the flow rate. So there's quite a bit of work to go about getting your layout set up just correctly. I suggest not putting a whole bunch of widgets or controls on your screen at once. Just put them on one at a time and make sure your connections are right as you go. So that's something about the constraint layout that you have to work with. All right, another note is, you notice where this here project is located. It's in the Cis2250 2017-2018 class activities repository under module 3, and it's called Water BM for BJ McLean. So that's where it is if you want to look at this. So the activity I'm going to work with was to add another button, say a reset button, to this here view. Okay, so I'm going to flip back to the text view of this layout. All right, so when you look at it in text view, you'll notice there's entries in here for all the different controls or views that are added onto that screen. All right, so if I look down at the button, the calculate button, you notice here's the constraints. So the end of it goes to the parent. Right. The start of it goes to the parent. That's the left. This is the right. So the right of it goes to the parent. The left of it goes to the parent. All right. The top of it goes to the bottom of the text view flow rate. Right, so we'll flip back to the design. You see the flow rate is right above the calculate, and that's what the constraint view uses to position all the controls on the form. All right, so it's a little tedious, but just take some time, set it up. We don't have hundreds of controls, so it's not that bad. Okay, there's one other note. You'll notice for this constraint view, what I added here at the top, I added this guideline. And with constraint views, you can add a guideline. I have this one set up to be positioned at 50% of the screen. So it's going to be a vertical guideline right down the middle of the screen. All right, so say I've got a vertical line going right down, and I can use that to position controls. So if you wanted one at 30% of your screen, you could add a guideline that's right 30% over, and then you can use that to position some controls. So this here guideline is right in the middle of the screen. So what I did was I positioned so this one here is my header. That's okay, that's just in the middle. But say my diameter. So here's my diameter label. That's positioned to the left of, the right of this text view is to the left of the guideline in the middle. So that makes it go to the left of the middle. And you know, with the edit text for the diameter, I have it set up just to go to the right of the guideline. So you can use those guidelines in constraint views in order to help position your controls if you want. Okay, so this is up and running. The main activity is up on the Java folder. So I've got a main activity which was mostly built by default. What I added was the call to the functionality. So here's a little bit more. So this is what we do whenever we want to get references to controls on our views. All right, so what we have to do is to get, say, a reference to the button, I have to create a button object. So it's an attribute of the main activity. And then what we did was in the onCreate of the activity, we call the initialize. All right, so at the very end of the onCreate, we call the initialize method. And what it does, it actually gets the concrete instance of the, say, the button. All right, so the button calculate, we use the find view by ID in the activity. And then what it does, it gets the actual button that's associated with the screen. All right, so we use this resource class, R, and that's built by Android and gives us all the controls in your application have an entry if they have an ID on them. So r.id.buttonCalculate will reference this button that actually exists on the view. So button calculate ID is specified here on the view, and then it gives us a reference to it by using the find view by ID method. Okay, so now I've got the button, a reference to the button. You see I've got a reference to the other controls as well, the text, that the controls allow us to enter the diameter, height, and flow rate, and also the result text view, because I want to set the actual result whenever we do the calculate. We're going to put the answer in the text view result. Okay, so the next piece is to add a listener to the button. So in our initialize, what we do is we set up the code which is going to run whenever somebody clicks that button. All right, so we have to put the set on click listener. All right, if I wanted to redo that, I could just show you how it's done. So button calculate, control space, works. So button calculate, and then what you do is I use a lot of autocomplete, so you don't have to type out all that code. Set on click. So set on click listener, and what I want to do is pass a new onClick view.onClick listener, and I do the autocomplete here, and you see it builds me up a stub of the method that I actually have to call, right? So I have to override the onClick method of the onClick listener. So now whenever that button is clicked, this here method will run. Right, so it's very similar to C#, except that it's not quite as intuitive. You don't just have to double click on the button and it builds all this for you. You actually have to do some of the coding yourself, but it's the exact same process behind the scenes. All right, so then you see the code I have for the on-click listener. If I move that in here, it'll be the same thing. My version of. All right, so now I've got the code moved into this on-click with this on-click listener. All right, so what I do is I get the diameter. All right, you notice I use the edit text from the form, which we got up here. All right, and I do call the method getText, which gives it back to me. But the thing is, that doesn't give me back a string. It gives me this thing called an editable. But if I call the toString method on the editable, then it converts it to a string. So now I've got my diameter as a string off of the edit text. So whatever they typed in over here will be in this string now. Same thing for height and flow rate. All right, so this calculator class, this was created by the Cis2250 group, and it just had it had all the functionality needed to do the calculation of how long it's going to take you to fill up that container. So that's sort of specific, the business logic specific to that filling that container. So I don't care too much about that. We tested it and we know it works. So whenever I call a constructor of that calculator, I convert those strings to doubles and pass in the diameter, height, and flow rate as doubles. And then the calculator object has a fill time for container attribute, and that's what I set on my text view using the setText method, passing the string value of. This here is a double, so pass that double to the value of method of a string, pass that string to the setText, and that's how the answer gets put out on the app. So if I put 11 to 30 and calculate. All right, so the code, the setText just ran. You notice on my content main, my text over here, I set the text color to be a little colorful. Oh. Change that. It's supposed to be. Okay, so that's how the app works. If I wanted to go about adding another control, say I wanted to add a reset button, all right, I would come up here. All right, so I got to watch out with my constraint view, right? My text view is coming to the bottom of my calculate button. All right, my calculate button is going below the text view flow rate. So I'm going to create another button. I could use the design view and drop it on, but I also can make changes in here. Right, so I'm going to add another button. I'm going to call it button reset. Text is going to be reset. I'm going to put it to the bottom of Why doesn't it like that? It does. Okay, the only other change I have to make is make sure that I put my text view to the bottom of my button reset. All right, so that's specifying, you know, it's not too bad to add one extra control. It's whenever you throw a whole bunch of them on the constraint view that it causes some issues. All right, so if I flip back over to my design, there it is. There comes my reset button. The text view is down below it, so everything looks good. We'll give it a try. All right, so I'm going to rerun it. I'm going to pick my emulator. All right, I'll let that run. All right, the problem is I didn't add any code for that button yet, but to do that is not so bad. In my main activity, right, I have to make reference to that button. I'm going to use this attribute to hold the reference to the reset button. Reset. Right, so now I've got the actual button. I have to add in a listener to that button. All right, I'm just going to, I could just do the autocomplete again, but might as well just copy it. Here. Reset. Set on-click listener to a new on-click listener. Maybe click on that one. I don't really want to do any of this stuff. All I want to do is I just want to set my values back to 0. So I'm just going to say edit text diameter. Set text. Put a 0 there. Same thing with my height. And set flow rate. So that's all I want to do whenever I click that button. I'm just going to it'll probably take a minute for me to rebuild this project. It's been trying to build as I've been making code changes. So I'm just going to pause it. You'll see I'm pausing it at 11:14. Okay, so I'm back. Took a minute or so. But now see my app has been redeployed and now has a reset button. Let me test it, see, so it should set the values to 0. It doesn't yet. So you see there's a problem. It was building while I was making changes. So it doesn't appear that the changes have taken effect yet. So I'm going to let it build again and rerun it. Okay, so we're back. You see now it's relaunched again. I click the reset button. It sets everything back to 0 for me. All right, so I'm going to stop this video here. Hopefully it helps you be able to add some buttons and follow along with some of the this here water calculator app. And thanks.